Greetings, welcome to the show. This is the overview, and I'm your host, Brother Mbogo. Today I'm going to talk about this organization or secret organization. They call it the Illuminati. And I think a lot of people have heard the term Illuminati. They know it's some kind of secret society. And the popular narrative, if you read online, is that the Illuminati existed as an organization, but it was banned and disbanded a few years, maybe 20 years after it was started. It was started in 1776, so by the early 1800s. It was supposed to have been banned in Germany, and from there it didn't exist again. But the reality is actually different, and that's what I'm going to be looking at today. I'm also looking at the idea that many of the concepts of the Illuminati have been incorporated into some of today's ideologies of organizations like the World Economic Forum. So anyway, let me start off by taking a basic look at what the beginnings basically of this organization called the Illuminati. So the order of the Bavarian Illuminati was founded on the 1st of May in the year 1776. The founder of the order was Adam Weishaupt, and who was raised by his godfather, Baron Ixtat. Continuing, so there are 5 original members of the Illuminati, including Adam Weishaupt. There was him and 4 of his students. The names, should I go through the names? Franz Anton, Max Elder, Andreas Suter, and Bauhof. These were the 4 original members of the organization that he set up. So it grew to a membership of at least 2,500 members within the first 10 years. And the members came from the ranks of academia, the nobility, from government bureaucracy, the diplomatic community, the legal establishment, the military, various police forces, the medical profession, the church, and the other essential institutions. Most of the documents that I'm reading, one is from a book called, I'll mention the name of the book in a minute. So there are 3 documents explaining the background to the Illuminati. The Perfectionist is the main book that I'll be looking at. It was written, I think in 2009. It's more or less a deep dive into the organization called the Illuminati. It provides a lot of information which most people will not have heard of regarding what actually happened to the Illuminati, how far it spread around the world, particularly the Western world. So this Adam Weishaupt was he was a Jesuit, another kind of secret society that existed at the time, which had been dissolved. Also from there, being a member of the organization, he joined another organization before creating the Illuminati. And the order of the Illuminati structure was mainly modeled on the Jesuit order. However, Weishaupt also found or borrowed much from the craft after he was made a strict observance Freemason in the Bavarian capital of Munich in 1777. So a year after forming the Illuminati, he joined the Freemasons, and some of the structure of the Illuminati was borrowed from that. So the original name of the Illuminati was the Perfectionists, the idea of perfecting mankind spiritually to become a divine person. They borrowed a lot of their ideology from ancient spiritual traditions like the Kemetic and Phoenician, and some Greek and some Hindu, and also the Buddhist traditions. I'd say that yes, they did that, but because they didn't go through the proper spiritual practices of these spiritual organizations, there was not actually any kind of spiritual growth taking place. It's just the basic ideas that they borrowed. So anyway, going into the basic breakdown of the organization, the object of the first degree of Illuminism is at once to train their young men and to inform of everything that is going forward by a system of espionage. The superiors aim at This, what I'm reading here, basically is saying that they used information about their converts to keep them in line. Basically, any kind of secret that you have, they use it to bribe you and make sure that you behave yourself, or they reveal your information. The superiors aim at procuring from the inferiors diplomatic acts, documents, and other original writings. With pleasure, they see them commit any treason or treacherous acts, because they not only turn the secrets betrayed to their own advantage, but thereby have it in their own power to keep the traitors in a period perpetual dread. But they keep their members fearing that this information, secret information that they have about them, will be revealed. The Illuminati who wishes to rise to the highest degree must be free from all religion, for a religionist will never be admitted to the highest degree. So they're anti-religion. I'll read out some of their agenda in a while, but I'm just giving a brief idea of the framework of the organization. One must be submissive to the superiors of Illuminism than to the sovereigns, magistrates, or who govern the people, and he that gives the preference to the sovereigns or governors of the people is useless to us. So you have to be dedicated to the Illuminati. You can't be more dedicated to your government or your state. So let's look at the mindset that you're supposed to have as a member of the Illuminati. Now, as I mentioned a while ago, something about the Freemasons. What happened with the Freemasons is that the Illuminati actually took over, had strong influence, I should say, on the Freemasons, because the ideology of this Adam Weishaupt was adopted by the leaders, I would say, of the Freemasons. Somebody managed to convince them to follow this new ideology. Even though he himself was a Freemason, because he was a Freemason, he was able to bring many of the Freemasons into the Illuminati. That's one of the reasons it spread so quickly and spread so wide, not only in Germany, but across the European continent. Let me read here. The power and influence of the Illuminati achieved a great leap forward through forming an alliance with continental Freemasonry that was sealed during the Congress of Wilhelmsbad, which began July 16, 1782, when representatives of some 3 million members of Europe's secret societies met and adopted organizational plans formulated by the Illuminati. That's basically saying that the structure and the plans of the Illuminati, as it says, was adopted by the Freemasons. So basically you could say that they took over the Freemasons. On 16th of July 1782, the Illuminati merged with the Order of Freemasons. Illuminism was injected into Freemasonry by indoctrinating the Masonic leaders. The alliance between the Illuminati and Freemasonry was finally sealed. At Wilhelmsbad, Weishaupt and von Nigge presented quite an enticing promise of the secrets which the Illuminati had to offer. The response of many of the Italian, French, and German delegates was to join. They then took the doctrines of the order, its degrees and discipline, back to their respective lodges. That's just continuing saying that the lodges of Freemasons throughout Europe, but particularly these countries, Italy, French, and Germany, adopted the doctrines and principles of the Illuminati, which I'll explain in a while what they actually were. Let me leave that part. I'll continue. Anyway, that was just explaining of how the Freemasons adopted the ideology of the Illuminati. This here is a summary of some of the main ideas of the Illuminati, some of their agenda. Some of this agenda that I'll read, you'll recognize in some of the ideologies that are taking place today. The first one you probably want, the abolition of monarchy and ordered government, the abolition of private property and inheritance. This can relate to what you hear people talking about, we shall own nothing and be happy, so that people won't own property anymore. And what you read about it, I think in the UK and some countries where this inheritance tax is preventing people from inheriting the properties of their parents when the parents pass away. This is inheritance tax, you could argue, prevents people from keeping their land. So the land will be taken away from people by the government. So this is part of the agenda of people not owning, abolishing private property, you could argue. The abolition of patriotism. Part of this global governance or one world government type of system where there's no individual countries. So you'll be only patriotic to the wider world, you won't be patriotic to your country. The abolition of the family. This one plays into this, I don't know if you call it extreme feminism or feminism. If you read books on feminism, they go to the extent of saying that family is a prison to the woman. So they want to break down the concept of the family. So this is an idea that you could argue goes back to the Illuminati, if they're arguing that the family should be abolished. And the reason why, as I said, the abolishing the family plays into this narrative of the family is a restriction on the freedom, the social and spiritual freedom of the individual. So if someone is dedicated to their family, then that's almost an egotistical attitude towards life, where your ego is focused on the family, or your ego is focused on your country or your community. So the concept of the Illuminati is to break down all of these small groups so that somebody is only dedicated to the global community. Abolition of religion. Religion is also another group which puts people in different groupings, which they want to also break down. As I was saying, I'm talking about their agenda, so some of these documents or passages will be explaining what their conception of their agenda is. Probably the most shocking of all Illuminati doctrines are those which explicitly call for a revolution and overthrow of the existing social order. That is the breaking down of governments and so forth. That's one of the reasons they were banned, because their ideas of breaking down, getting rid of governments and having only one large global community. The order of the Illuminati not only had the desire to accomplish its mission, it increasingly became apparent that it had the means, for the simple fact that a vast number of prominent officials within the government and the men of all stations in virtually every court, council and duchy of Europe were secretly members of the order. Should I read this part here? The grand art of rendering any revolution whatsoever certain is to enlighten people, and to enlighten them insensibly to turn public opinion to the adoption of those changes which are the given object of the intended revolution. So you want to enlighten them on your agenda, or convince them that your agenda is the correct agenda, I would say. The Illuminati had indeed achieved an invisible government comprised of all classes, from merchants to booksellers, lawyers, judges, teachers, professors and pedagogues, court clerks, privy councillors, ministers of state, chamberlains and ambassadors, due in large part to the successful recruitment from the ranks of Freemasonry. The lesser nobles, barons, and counts represented the largest number of initiates, eventually even dukes and princesses. So all manner of people, from all government officials to the people in royalty, adopted they're already members of some kind of Freemasonry organization, but because the Illuminati took over the Freemasons, that all these people in different areas of society also became Illuminati. The enlightenment of the people and turning public opinion towards the goals of the order would be accomplished through the control of the education system. So they're talking about teachers, using teachers and lecturers now to indoctrinate the young people into their ways of thinking or educating them and turning them towards supporting their agenda, whatever their agenda is. As well, I mentioned some other aspects of the agenda earlier. Our strength chiefly consists in numbers, but much will be also depend on the means employed to form the pupil. Young people are pliant and easily take to the impression. The prefect will therefore spare no pains to gain possession of the schools which lie within his district and also of their teachers. He will find means of placing them under the tuition of members of our order, for this is the true method of infusing our principles and of training our young men. It is thus that the most ingenious men are prepared to labor for us and are brought into discipline, and thus that the affection concealed by our young peoples for the order will gain as deep root as all other early impressions. So when you educate children from young into a certain ideology, then it tends to stick with their minds and formulate their further thinking as they grow. Basically, they're setting the root of their ideology in the young people from a early age. This is talking about now the Illuminati was banned maybe just about over 10 years after it was formed, even though it continued long after that, but it was banned about 10 years after it was formed because they conceived that this new organization wanted to break down the government or take over the government and bring it down. In 1784, Elector Karl Theodor Duke, the Duke of Bavaria, issued an edict against all societies not sanctioned by the government. And the year later, in 1785, Weishaupt was dismissed from his university position for acquiring atheistic literature, and Elector Karl Theodor, the Duke of Bavaria, issued another edict. This time the edict was specifically against Freemasonry and the Illuminati, so basically they were banned in 1785. So this Weishaupt fled Bavaria and was given sanctuary in the court of Saxe-Gotha. This is another part of Germany. He was forced to hide as posters called for his capture and arrest. He was given diplomatic immunity by another Duke, Ernst, in his embassy. And it continues to say the state of officials, military men, professors, and others were dismissed from their jobs or banished upon discovery of the continued existence of the Illuminati. And the elector issued a third edict threatening severe punishment for those who do not repent and come. So basically the organization was banned, and all those connected with the Illuminati were lost their jobs and some were arrested. But as I'll go on to say that the organization also formulated using different names. And because of that, now it continued. And probably one of the reasons why people say the Illuminati no longer exists, because it took different forms over the years. Remember, it was still part of the Freemasonry, and Freemasonry still exists today. So within the Freemasonry of today, you might find that the Illuminati ideas are still there. J.J.C. Bode became the head of the Illuminati after Weishaupt had gone into exile. So somebody took over when he went into exile. And then he also died in 1793. And the oppression of initiates still occurred in places as diverse as Saxe-Gotha, as I mentioned. These are different areas of Berlin, then in Paris, Italy, and even in Russia. So the Illuminati had stretched quite far. And the order was abolished officially in 1787. But then this new leader, Bode, starts a reform of the order in 1790 under the name, this is a German name, I can't say it properly, and he creates another organization out of the Illuminati called the Covenant of Consent, or the Moral Covenant of the Agreed. So it continued under different names, basically. And I'll go into that continuation now. There's some details about actually what happened. Historians accept that the Illuminatis disguised the activities in reading societies. The Illuminati had anticipated the coming persecution, and an order was given to cease their activities and turn themselves at once into reading societies in order to keep their membership in existence. So they formed reading societies, and they were now seen under this new identity of reading societies within universities and other establishments, but it was still the Illuminati, because the people who formed these societies were former Illuminati leaders, I should say. The great strength of our order lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in any place in its own name, but always covered by another name and another occupation. Next to the form of a learned or literary society is best suited to our purpose, and had Freemasonry not existed, this cover would have been employed. So even if they didn't join the Freemasons or take over the Freemasons, they would have used this other form to spread their ideology. It may be much more than a cover. It may be a powerful engine in our hands by establishing reading societies and subscription libraries and taking these under our direction and supplying them through our labors. We may turn the public mind which way we will, which means they'll formulate and direct the public's perception of the world through their reading societies and libraries, or reading libraries. So this part here, no, this one is, no, I'll leave that one. Anyway, so it is mentioning former Illuminati members or leaders also formed other organizations apart from the reading libraries. They formed the Mainz Jacobin Club in 1792 called the Friends of Liberty and Equality, and used the Liberty tree top with the red Jacobin cap as its emblem. That's another organization formed by former Illuminati members. So continuing, I'm looking here at the spread. I'm going to mention the skull and bones in a minute. People think, or hear the rumor, or seen the rumor that skull and bones was part of the Illuminati. There's some truth to that. I'll go into that in a minute, but I'm just talking about how the Illuminati spread from here. In 1786 to 1787, the Illuminati had enormous tentacles inside every branch of the authority in Bavaria and Greater Germany. The sheer size and scope of the conspiracy alarmed the authorities to no end. They had allegedly extended their reach into France, Italy, Australia, Bohemia, Hungary, Poland, Holland, Denmark, Sweden, Russia, Switzerland, and England, even to America. By their own account, in the third year of Operation Weishaupt, boasted that they had more than 1,000 initiates. Liga recruited an additional 500, mostly Masons, so mostly Freemasons that became part of the Illuminati. Very shortly after this initiation in 1780, by the time of the first edicts against the order, the Illuminati were estimated to have been between 2,000 to 3,000 members. Remember, these are all people in high positions in society working within the governments or royalty. So there are people, 2,000 people have significant status within society, people who could influence their societies. And looking at France in particular here, due to the dearth of relevant literature available in English, we in North America can be forgiven, I suppose, for not really understanding that Bode, he was the leader of the Illuminati at one time after Weishaupt had left. Bode successfully imported Bavarian Illuminism into France. He not only succeeded in recruiting prominent members of the French Freemasonry, but together with these new initiates established a fully functioning secret Illuminati lodge. So it clearly states that they existed within France. Even this Thomas Jefferson is one of the founding fathers of the United States. mentioned Weishaupt. This is from a letter he wrote to Bishop Madison in 1780. I think he had been reading about this Adam Weishaupt of the Illuminati. So this is part of this whole letter, but I just selected a small portion to read. Weishaupt had lived under the tyranny of a despot and priest. He knew that caution was necessary in spreading information on the principles of pure morality. He proposed therefore to lead the Freemasons to adopt this object and to make the objects of their institutions the diffusion, science, and virtue. He proposed to initiate new members into this body by graduations, proportion to his fears of the thunderbolts of tyranny. The tyranny, it seems, is the German government. This has given an air of mystery to his views, was the foundation of his banishment and the subversion of the Masonic order. And this is the color for the ravings against him of Robinson, Barrell, and Morse, whose real fears are that the craft will be endangered by the spreading of information, reason, and natural morality among men. So he's defending Weishaupt because a lot of the Illuminati documents talk about morality and spiritual growth, but as I mentioned earlier, they wanting to break down the family structure. So in one sense he's talking about morality, global morality, but in another sense he's talking about breaking down the basic family unit of parents, and even the basic structures of community he wants to break down in order for people to be dedicated to a wider global world community. So in one sense it sounds moral and good, but in another sense it's breaking down the natural order structures of society. So anyway, so that was a look at how the organization spread. But in terms of these skull and bones, we know of George Bush in particular being a member of the secret society at Yale University. So I'll take a look at that. In this sense, the Illuminati became a prototype of the Order of Skull and Bones, who gained control over Yale University, indoctrinating its most promising students into their secret society. After graduating from Yale, the initial Bonesmen went on to implement the goals of the Illuminati with scientific precision. Throughout the United States, some of its members ended up in complete control of major universities and held key positions within the bureaucracy of America's educational apparatus. Top pedagogue professors and educational theorists were connected to the order. This goes on to say, it gives some history as to how the Skull and Bones came to America. It came from Germany. So there was an Order of Skull and Bones in Germany, and a new branch was set up at Yale University in the US. Well, according to the File and Claw break-in group, Bones is a chapter of corps of a German university. It should probably be called the Skull and Bones chapter. General Russell, its founder, was in Germany before his senior year and formed a warm friendship with a leading member of the German society. The meaning of the permanent number 322 in all Bones literature is that it was founded in 32 as the second chapter of the German society. And continuing explaining more the deeper connection with this German society and the Illuminati itself. Since Skull and Bones descends from an earlier German chapter that has the distinction of reference of Demosthenes, I think is one of the Greek philosophers, logic, and would suggest we try and find another senior society before 1832 and somewhere in Germany, which was also comprised of acolytes of Demosthenes. Intriguingly, I have found reference to one such student society in Germany engaging in secret rites accomplished by a statue of Demosthenes, and most significantly, saying basically that this educational institution, two of its leading members or two of his leading professors were members of the Illuminati, and they were professors at this German university, which are links to the Illuminati, the Skull and Bones. So let's look at the Illuminati and some basically, but the whole book explains a lot more than what I've said in terms of its understanding and its ideologies towards family and the global community. Some would argue that its ideology is what led to this one world government type of ideology that you talk about or hear about in so-called conspiracy theories, and some of the ideas behind this World Economics Forums, that you shall own nothing and be happy, and the ideas around the abolition of the family and support for abortion and such things. So let's look at the Illuminati. It's interesting to know that this organization still exists, even though the name still doesn't exist. The ideologies of the Illuminati were promoted throughout different organizations, and the organization itself could be argued still exists in different formats or under different names. There are many secret organizations or Freemason type also secret societies which exist today, which I think I'll need to study and find out if their ideology stems from the Illuminati, which would mean that the Illuminati still exists, as I said, in different forms. Anyway, that's it for now.